Hey, it's your buddy Peace and Harmony with you here today. We're focusing in on a covert narcissistic manipulation tactic that oftentimes hinders those around them, and that is a sense of subtle scrutiny and hostility that pervades a very quiet and indifferent demeanor. And the reason why this original quietness, passivity, which was initially attractive, becomes one of a narcissistic ploy is because it creates an atmosphere where those around them who essentially then serve as supply or serve as support have to go above and beyond to meet them where they're at. And this becomes, it creates an atmosphere where one doesn't really know where they stand with this individual. And this lack of communication, this subtle scrutiny, which means they're kind of sizing you up, or it's a kind of a quiet condescension. And it's not really, it doesn't exist in the mind of those around. So oftentimes wonder, well, maybe I'm just being overly sensitive, or maybe it's just me. Well, realize that this is really an indelible and hallmark trait of a covert narcissist, is this subtle scrutiny and this indifference, this very quiet, tight-lipped approach where they don't really communicate. They don't really show you where they stand. It is really the omission or withholding of information that becomes the issue. And it is in this withholding of guidance, speaking up, vocalizing where they're at, that it creates this atmosphere or this mystery of indifference and tension, and really feeling like where one doesn't really know where they're at. So it creates an excessive need on the part of the other or the supply to serve to please them. So in other words, oftentimes people want to resolve this tension in the atmosphere. So here we then create the origination of the people-pleasing, the codependent persona, or the codependent personality, which is then developed as a reaction to keeping peace, to keeping harmony, to keeping this person happy, because most supply or most individuals who find themselves targeted by a narcissist or a psychopath find that they have a tendency to desire happiness in their environment. They do not like fighting. They really don't like confrontation if they can at all help it. They want things to be hunky-dory. They want things to be, I would say, a harmonious environment. And so they can be very sensitive to the needs of others. And so this then, unbeknownst to them, kind of on a very unconscious level, it becomes the setting or foundation of the codependent persona or identity, where one must then go above and beyond to keep this person happy. And of course, with any relationship, there is that. There is the, coming together with terms, the interdependence. There is the focusing on the positive. We're referring to, when one's life then becomes laid down in the service of one individual person to the denial or lack of attending to your needs. So in other words, your needs get squelched. Your voice gets sequestered. Your needs get silenced. In other words, you're not permitted to vocalize those because you're met with a very scrutinizing person to begin with. So they are able to, through that atmosphere or environment that they create, are able then to turn the attention onto them, their needs, through very quiet and subtle ways. So it becomes a very uneasy environment to exist in. And so oftentimes people need a sense of feedback or response to, especially if you're in a work environment, or you're married to this person, or you're in a family setting, family dynamic, there needs to be the requirement of a feedback loop. And so you then it then becomes required to satisfy their narcissistic needs, but you are not getting your healthy narcissistic needs met. So we then create this chronic and progressive codependency, which means it's a constant feeling that you have to serve others, or you have to subjugate yourself, really kind of humiliate yourself, or make yourself very meek in the humbling of others. And it's oftentimes, it can be excessively so, where one, then gets into a habitual method of, or a system, personal relating system, through socialization and other communication, just always subverting, themselves, or, not really taking credit where credit is due, and not being able to really have one's own accomplishments aired out and experienced by others. And so really the covert narcissist will draw you in this way. And initially, the covert narcissist draws people in through this sort of quiet air of superiority or strength. And so really the initial very quiet demeanor is what was attractive, but then it also becomes a sort of trap, if you will, because it is not reciprocated. The attention is not reciprocated. Your needs aren't validated. Your needs aren't discussed. Your needs aren't made worthwhile or worthy, and they're just kind of ignored. And so, oftentimes, this quietness is perceived as an intelligence. So it's in the mind of those people who have been victimized, that they see this as an intelligence, and they've to get a closer relationship with them, the people-pleasing behavior really starts to step up, and and that becomes the motivation. And I'm just referring to my notes here. So it really becomes, like a desire to win their approval. And so here we go. We're setting up when you have an incessant need to win the approval of others. Realize that, oftentimes children have that, where they want their approval of their parents, and their parents are like, good job, and and that's they're applauding their talents and their accomplishments. So it's very healthy for the children to have that approval, because they're reinforcing, they're knowing what behaviors and disciplines to continue. But what ends up happening then is when in spousal, or even in mature relationships, where you constantly need to feel you have to work towards the approval, or constantly seeking the validation that one never received from this covert narcissist. So it becomes a very kind of an endless track, or an endless journey, to try to win the approval from this individual, where oftentimes the stakes get higher and higher. And as you know, if you're trying to win the approval of someone outside of yourself, that means that the eventual perpetual guidepost for which you are trying to, your measuring stick can go all over the place, and it can create quite a bit of chaos, and frankly, quite a bit of exhaustion on the part of the individual who tries to maintain the happiness of that covert narcissist. It's like they're dancing in circles around this person, always trying to please them, satisfy them, win their approval. But oftentimes, there's a void created within the individual themselves, which they're then coming from to try to fill, but it can't be filled because the approval is never validated from the narcissist. They just don't have that ability. They don't have the personality character to give that to you. They're not giving in that way. And it does intensify, I would say, with time. It becomes more intensive. The needs with which this becomes apparent, because people's personalities grow, their qualities grow, and so the covert narcissist will generally skew more one way, and then, the people-pleasing will have to intensify to live up to their needs. And where this can also become very difficult is when there's the continual references and to needing approval or having to ask for approval. And then the covert basically has one trapped in this respect. And so, eventually then people then feel a sense of wanting to give up. And, it's in this, it's used to such a low profile with these individuals that they tend to, become very meek in presence of others. In other words, they become, very rounded shouldered, very low energy, not exuding a lot of confidence. And so it tends to cause them to attract other sort of perpetrators and violators because they're seeing that this has become now their demeanor as it's evolved through the years. So it's very important to realize that it's important to become assertive and learn how to assert yourself so your rights, your voice is not overlooked. Because this becomes a subtle form of exploitation. It becomes a subtle form of manipulation. And so if you have felt this sort of, vastness of a void, or a growing distance between you and a covert narcissist, chances are it's because, there's not a meeting of minds, there's not a meeting of hearts, and there's not a meeting of terms. And, really sort of what we call human rights, which is your human right to feel safe, secure, happy, confident, fulfilling of your dreams, your voice. So, if you feel like your voice has been kind of like lost in the shuffle, then you need to realize that it's part of your human right to, freedom of speech and, pursuit of happiness is part of your inalienable human right. And that's written into the U.S. Constitution. So, it's just, but we're talking about something really basic here, which is when you have been silenced or oppressed by a manipulative abuser, and in essence, you've been told to squelch your voice. You've been told to shut it down through a number of different words. Verbal tonality can also do this. It's oftentimes in the tone of the covert narcissist or the narcissist that tells one that one is less than or one is being subtly scrutinized. Because it's in the withholding of approval that you feel you don't know where you stand, so it creates this chaos. So that's why it's very important for you to learn to be assertive and to have your boundaries and to speak really in support of yourself. And really not react aggressively or passively, because if you just passively allow this to happen, it's like a quiet bullying, if you will. And remember that the root of oftentimes a lot of bullying and manipulation is insecurity. So for example, it's like, have you ever seen like one of those little chihuahuas, that they almost, attack the big dogs because they think they're a big dog, or maybe chihuahuas don't do that. They're so cute. What are the little dogs like the Jack Russells, that like they feel like they're a big dog, like even though they're a little dog, like it's just part of their temperament. And, where am I going with this? Where I'm going is that basically the bully is, a very small person inside. The bully, as we know, has an inferior sense of self. That's why they resort to this bullying. It's because they feel inadequate in some way. So if they can bully, this is very important here, and I hope you've stayed on this long. If they can bully and they can be aggressive and loud, it's because you're paying attention to the loudness and, that bold, brash. And that is getting your attention, and it's distracting you from really the shortcomings of that individual. It is distracting you from the, insecurity that this person is trying to cover up. And it's not that they're processing through it. It's not that they've worked on it. They have basically covered it up. And as we know, everything that gets covered up eventually is going to come clean, or it's going to become bare or naked. And it's going to manifest itself. So the bully, for example, the big guy who might try to beat up kids and smack them around might be coming from a troubled family. The mean girl who calls others the B word and is yelling and is using a lot of profanities could feel very inferior. She might be coming from another country or have a different religion or suffered something in her background that causes her to come out, extremely loud, aggressive, pushy, not a good listener, not receptive. And so it can become very, very apparent, this person's size. They could be, it's like the very short, mean person, the very short, overweight, mean person, who does not have a good self-esteem but overcompensates, doesn't want you to look at these qualities of her, so uses a very loud, aggressive voice, and pushes you through her vocalization and her hostile tone in order to get their way and cover up for their inferiority, that they have shortcomings, but they can't work through those. They have that going on for them. So realize it's important to be assertive and stand up for your ground. And I'm going to be developing video content here in depth, because I know it's hard to pay attention to a lot of this sometimes. But assertiveness training is, really an important part of your I am. And it's really being able to deal with people in a calm, empathetic, compassionate manner, but not losing yourself in the process. Because oftentimes what ends up happening when one is involved with a narcissist or a psychopathic individual is you end up losing yourself. You end up losing kind of who you are. You're not, it's like, you're not permitted to be who you are because you have to go to people please them. And so we're going to go more in depth on that and how to keep your, hold your ground while you're, if you have to deal with, and how to cope with a narcissistic or psychopathic individual who is in your sphere of influence. This is Peace and Harmony with you here today. I hope these videos, that they do help. Please share and please subscribe for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support.